This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 69 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This is as sexual as our show gets. This week, Tesla Plaid, the fastest production car in the world. Solar and wind, almost entirety of U.S. new energy projects last year. The gas industry is paying Instagram influencers. And some supercharger news. Things are changing in the Tesla world. All kinds of things. As we are one day late this week, Brian Stockton, I am obligated by law to ask, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it was a weird day yesterday. We only had this small window of time where we could record, and we got about 5 minutes in, and then the power went out at my house. And but anyway, we're back.
Yes, and we were talking about how I had my second vaccine shot just the day before on Tuesday, and you had yours on Friday.
Yeah, I had mine on Friday.
And guess what? Since we tried to record yesterday morning, I've had issues. I've had flu-like symptoms yesterday, so it's maybe a good thing we didn't record because I wouldn't have been able to put the show together.
Interesting.
It wasn't terrible, but I didn't feel great. Didn't feel like myself, and tried to nap, and in the evening, I popped a Advil, and eventually, I started to feel human again. So it wasn't terrible. It wasn't the thing that I've been expecting for months, that the second dose of Pfizer would be a killer. But Brian, I'm superhuman now. I'm feeling superhuman. I'm 2 days in.
Right, and then 3 weeks later, then you can start licking strangers again.
Finally, the strangers have been asking, James, when are you going to start licking again? And the answer is soon, people, soon. People wonder why a clean energy show has people like us hosting. This is our weekly conversation about how the world is changing. And it is changing fast. So fast that we need to do an hour-long podcast every week and even then we omit stuff. It's just, it's crazy, Brian.
Yes, and I have a further update. My partner got a vaccine in the city of Weyburn, which is an hour south of us. So we had to drive there, but, we got the appointment, so that was great. And but I mentioned it mostly because on the drive there, we saw a gigantic wind turbine convoy on the highway. There were several trucks hauling about 6 gigantic wind turbine blades. And it was just super impressive, and they were crazy big. It was just so weird to see them on the highway like that, on the longest semi-trucks I have ever seen. They were sort of pulled over to the side. And we were able to get a good look, but it was quite something.
I wonder how they make turns. Sometimes when you're transporting large things, you have to take down power lines, but that's not going to be the case here. It's a matter of turning. How do they? Do the police help them? Do they must plan a very specific route? And I've seen one turbine blade transported in the States, and it was the largest object I had ever seen. And it's just. And these aren't even the big ones. These are probably a fraction of the size of the ones that they're putting offshore in the UK, these new super giant GE ones, which are something like a football field per blade, like they're huge.
Yeah.
And also efficient because they figure they can't get much bigger. But anyway, so when I went to get the vaccine, they said to me, very sternly and very urgently, you have to, when I tell you where to go, inside the building, when you drive inside the building, this is my Nissan Leaf I'm driving, an electric car, I want you to turn off the ignition and pull out the key. Now, I have neither an ignition or a key, no engine to turn off. But I didn't say anything because you told me that it was pointless to talk to them because you tried to explain last time, during one of your first vaccine shots, that they didn't understand. So I figured, I'm not going to argue it. I'm just happy to be here. But the guy in the truck behind me, combustion truck, he turned his engine on right away after getting the shot inside the building. They were not happy and they kept running. And because I had 2 people in my car, my wife left work and ran up and joined me in line. And we had 2 people and he had to wait. So not happy. And then I parked beside a Tesla when I got out in our small Canadian city with very few electric cars. I happened to park beside a Model Y. So cool.
We're still a small community, so it's still a bit unusual to see one. We tend to wave at each other as we pass each other on the street, which is, I'm not sure how long that's going to last. But one more thing to mention, I'm actually getting a Tesla mobile service call today.
Ooh.
So there's a slight chance we will have to pause the podcast and I can go chat with that person. But
I think we should just make that part of the podcast, Brian. Just
yeah. I don't have a mobile microphone is the only problem.
Damn you.
I know we spoke a couple of weeks ago where the mobile service actually fixed an issue with my car over the internet, which was great. But when he pulled up my profile, there was a couple of sort of service bulletins, like not recalls, but the car has a couple of service bulletins. So he said, well, let's book you in for the next time in town. And that apparently will be sometime this morning.
So our sister city in the province here has a Tesla service center, a physical building. And then where we live, they come door to door, I guess, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to see what kind of vehicle he's driving. But yeah, this is the way most Teslas are serviced, is with the mobile service. And they have this basically everywhere because it's sort of easier and simpler than having a whole bunch of buildings.
But as we've said many times on our show, and much to the disbelief of most of our listeners, it gets down to minus 40 here in the wintertime. Yes, why would you live here? Long story.
It's because we're stupid.
It's because we're stupid. It's because our brains froze at one time, and we no longer were able to make the decision not to.
I have another quick weather story, because we seem to often talk about the weather. There's been a lot of extreme weather in the time we've been recording this podcast. But yeah, I wanted to mention it because I was driving my car the day after our massive rainstorm of a few days ago. We were absolutely deluged with water. And so I got in my Tesla and I started driving down the street, and just a few houses away, I drove through the biggest puddle I've ever driven through in a car. I wasn't expecting it at all. We don't usually get massive puddles like this on our street, but yeah, the water came halfway up the hood of the car. I was quite alarmed.
Halfway up the hood of the car?
Halfway up the hood of the car.
That's insane. What did you think was going to happen? This is your Tesla Model 3 long range. White, if you're trying to picture it.
Definitely worried. I mean, I knew the stories, like, Teslas fare better in conditions like that than gasoline cars. And I think had I been driving a gasoline car, there's a good chance that the air intake would have got choked out with water.
But you might have got water in your engine or your transmission where there's oil. And that would have been very bad, even if you didn't choke.
Intellectually, I knew, I'm probably going to be okay. But it's pretty alarming to have water coming up the hood of your car suddenly when you're not expecting it.
Wow. And, it's not much of a rainstorm for most people, I think, in most parts of the world where we live in a virtual arid landscape here on the prairies. And it's other places would be prepared for that amount, like it was 50 millimeters at most, in a couple of hours. And people were, in their combustion cars, stuck and had to be rescued by the fire department in underpasses and in places where roads go under train tracks and when it gets deep. And the infrastructure is literally, what did they say, 1922 was the last time they did one of the underpasses, and it gets flooded. I've got a story about that, Brian. I know you like stories. Yeah. My kooky brother, who's 10 years older than me, we had this big storm in the 70s, and the underpass was flooded for days. And he went there, and I don't know, let's say he's 18 or something. He said, I'll jump in for $1. And he did, and he lost his glasses. It's a legendary Whittingham story that few people know, but he jumped in and then lost his glasses, which were more than $1. And I don't know why he did that, but anyway. That's incredible. You've traversed water. I know the Rivian truck and the Cybertruck are expected to, there's a name for it, I can't remember, but how much water you can go through before you float away. And it's not about getting electrocuted. You're not going to get electrocuted. People think that, and they assume that, and they're wrong. You won't get electrocuted, and you won't kill the battery or short anything out, because they're water sealed, to a certain depth. And then what happens in the Rivian truck, which is just coming out, in a matter of days or weeks, is that you will float away more than 1.5 meters of water, but it's good for 1.5 meters. And that's a small truck. So it's not like the Cybertruck, which is a bit tall and you can raise the wheels and things like that. So these are, of all the reasons, Brian, for getting an EV, we found another one. There's just a ridiculous number of them. And it's, however, last week on the show, we were talking about my Clean Energy Show investigation into what EVs can make the Regina to Calgary trip in Canada, because personally, for me, not you, but me, that is my one-day trip in a car. And you were a bit surprised by some of my results. I was a bit surprised. And on Twitter, I just wanted to mention that I did a few more cars on our Clean Energy Pod handle on Twitter. The Tesla Model Y standard range fails with 5 chargers, but some of them are short, and charging only totals 1 hour and 26 minutes, which isn't terrible for somebody who really wants an EV. You get the longer range one, you'll be fine. Not terrible in perfect weather, but less than ideal weather is a challenge, Brian.
And I just want to say that they will all do the trip, but you set certain criteria that it's just not worth it to do the trip if you have to have too many stops, or, the charging is too slow, it takes too long. There's a big difference between cars that have the really kind of often the same amount of range.
But this trip occupies your entire day usually, and I spend a half an hour twice. There's the road is divided into 3 sections because of the cities that are on this relatively isolated highway. So I stop in Medicine Hat and Swift Current, Saskatchewan, and we basically have a meal each place because it's been 2.5, 3 hours of driving or more. So we stop there, and then with kids, it always turns out to be a half hour. So I was trying to emulate that and not make it too much, because if you add 2 hours to that, then it becomes kind of an arduous trip just for the average person to make. So I wanted it to be similar, and what I allowed was 30 minutes plus 30-minute stops at my usual place. Then I threw in a P stop allowed of 3 to 8 minutes in length, closer to Calgary. So the Model S Plaid can charge 187 miles, nearly 300 kilometers, in 50 minutes, according to Elon Musk, and this will be the shortest charging by far, I think. Don't you? What do you think about that, as far as what that's going to turn out like?
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I mean, I've gotten as high as 1,200 kilometers per hour as peak charging on my car.
Really?
Which, it's amazing. Of course, Tesla has the infrastructure as well, so it's always a bit more spotty if you have to go non-Tesla on a road trip.
And we should point out that where we live is not the EV center of the world. So there are relatively few chargers, but they are located enough to make the trip now, which is great, at least along the Trans-Canada Highway, which is the main east-west highway in Canada. The Lucid Air will do the one-way trip with just 2 stops, and this is impressive, Brian, 24 plus 26 minutes. That's as impressive as it gets. It has a huge range and a fast charging speed. What do you think of the Lucid Air?
I mean, it's not technically out yet, but if they can meet those specs, that sounds great.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that. Here's what I think. Right now, we have Tesla version 2 supercharger, or version 3, are capable to 350 kilowatts, right, of charging.
No, I think it's 250.
But I thought in theory that they were good to 350 in the future. They were future-proofed to 350.
Yeah, we think that they're spec'd to 350, but I don't think we have actual confirmation of that.
So people have been looking at the numbers of the amps that they're rated for on the Tesla. Tesla fans are relentless. They will look at everything and study everything and go on Reddit and talk about it. I just think that the other charging infrastructure we have, which is also rated to 350, which is the Petro-Canada stations. In the States, they have the Volkswagen Electrify America. Is that correct?
Yep.
And those are rated to 350. So we know that the charging stations are capable of 350. And I also think, by the way, that it's hilarious that people think constantly, you'll see these memes going around by anti-EV people that you can't charge at home or you will crash to the grid if 3 EVs charge at home, which is, let's say, 30 kilowatts at once. And one EV at a supercharger can charge 250. And you put 20 of them there. There's no grid crashing, people. The grids crash for different reasons, but it's not this. And it's and the ramp up of EVs will be accommodated by the grid. And we talked about that last week, that there was some studies on that, and it's not that big a deal. So, yeah, I think that 350, and I want to know what you think, that 350 will do it. We don't need to even go further than that. I know they will. They'll find ways of cooling the cable and doing things like that. But once we get a little bit higher density batteries, which are coming constantly in small increments, and we increase those charging speeds up to in and around that area, that will be enough for anyone to make a long-range trip, because you have to stop. You have to go to the bathroom. I mean, there's not much of an excuse.
Yeah, and the max charging on my car, because I have the cheaper Tesla, the max is 150, and I can tell you even that's adequate. 150 kilowatts. I drove 1,100 kilometers in one day on my trip last summer. So yeah, 250 kilowatts, 350 kilowatts is better, and it will keep improving. But we're basically already there. It's mostly the cars that are having to catch up at this point. And as you discovered in your sort of roundup there, a lot of them still come with kind of a slow max charging speed of like 50 kilowatts or 75 kilowatts.
Which is terrible and really not acceptable for 2021. I'm looking at UGM with the Bolt. They have not increased the charging speed on the Bolt, which is very sad. It makes me almost as angry as Toyota. Because Toyota's in the news again. I didn't want to bring it up, but they're in the news again saying that their hybrids and fuel cell cars are going to tie them through to 2050 or something. And it's just like, screw off, you morons. People, I don't give stock advice. I'm just a regular guy. But sell your Toyota stock. You want to be selling your Toyota stock right now if you have any Toyota stock. They don't get it. They don't get what's happening. And, I read stories of people all the time on the internet who have plug-in hybrids even, which are great, but they're old news. And people say, I don't like it. I want my electric car. And that's just the way it is. And Toyota does not understand that at all, which is so sad because I'm a Toyota customer. And I'm just one of these more people who would buy a Toyota electric EV if one was provided. Probably not going to happen. Moving to another brand.
Yeah, and if there wasn't, Tesla out there proving that it can be done, I think maybe plug-in hybrids would be quite popular now if Tesla didn't exist. That would seem like the next logical step, but, Tesla has leapfrogged.
Yeah, but they're saying there's going to be plenty of markets for us. Well, what are those markets? Uzbekistan? Obscure countries in Africa that have warlords in charge? Like, who are these countries? Because with so many of the main countries in the world, the major economies have already banned electric cars or combustion cars, the sale of them. So,
well, and the customer is still interested in a fossil fuel car, probably just going to want the cheapest one. So it won't even be the plug-in hybrids. It will be the cheaper, gas-only versions.
All right. So last week on the show, we recorded a few hours before the Model S Plaid was released. This is the performance version of the main Tesla sedan, the larger of the sedan models from Tesla. And Plaid means, is a reference to Spaceballs, the movie, how fast you can go. Ludicrous was before, now we have Plaid. So it's very fast. Got a clip of Jay Leno on CNBC talking about it because he set a record with the car on the track and then was on there to talk about it.
It is now the fastest production car you can buy. Faster than any Ferrari, faster than any $3.5 million Bugatti. It's pretty amazing. The most amazing part was that drag strip was near Bakersfield in an agricultural area. So there's farming all around. There were birds sitting on the Christmas tree. That's the light that comes down. When I stepped on the accelerator and took off and I came back down after going 152, the birds were still there.
Reason number 482 to buy an electric car: it doesn't scare birds at the racetrack. Usually there's a and not with the Tesla.
It's surprisingly quiet. So I just got a text that my Tesla mobile service person is here. So maybe we'll just finish the discussion about the Model S Plaid, and then we'll take a little break.
Okay. Well, it was a weird short demo, Brian. Okay. It was short. I was intrigued by the heat pump. They say it's 30% better in cold weather. The range is improved, I think, by 30%, which is very impressive for one step of a new heat pump. 50% less energy for the cabin. As a Canadian, as a person whose EV suffers in cold weather from range, And really, it doesn't change the experience of owning an EV. It's great in cold weather, but you do lose range. And this is impressive technology. And even today, Elon was talking on Twitter about maybe bringing this to the home heating market.
Yeah, I would love a highly efficient Tesla HVAC system to do heating and cooling in my house. I think as we're going to talk later about getting rid of natural gas in your house, so the way to do it would be something with what Tesla does in their cars. So I think, that's amazing. I hope they do a home HVAC. The other, I think, kind of major thing they mentioned in the presentation was the electric motors themselves. So they've redone the electric motors at Tesla. They can now do 20,000 RPM at the top end at 200 miles an hour. And they explained in the presentation they did it by wrapping the rotors in carbon fiber, which is something nobody's really done before. So that was, I think, the other kind of tidbit that we got in the presentation of what makes the Plaid new and special.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you run the motor that fast, which is 300 kilometers an hour, 200 miles an hour, what Porsche did with their Taycan electric performance car was have two gears. So this is nice not to need the two gears because that's a transmission, essentially. It's not maybe a normal transmission, but it is a transmission, which adds weight to the vehicle and adds things that can go wrong. Although, you're getting that torque and you're getting that. It's amazing that they're saying you get torque at really high speeds, which is not supposed to happen.
No, and I think that's maybe what everyone was expecting was going to have to happen to get this kind of performance, was to put in a transmission, which you typically don't need in an electric car. You just run the same gear, and obviously that's the conclusion that Porsche came to. They were like, okay, we've got to try and match Tesla's performance. The only way they could think to do it was to put in a transmission and have an extra gear. But, obviously Tesla has gotten a different answer to that problem.
I will point out that some electric buses have a two-speed transmission, and I heard one was looking at a third. That was a few years ago. I don't know whatever happened with that. So we have 0 to 60 miles per hour in 1.99 seconds, which is what the expensive sports car version, the Roadster, the new Roadster, which is taking forever to get here, was supposed to be. So do you think the Roadster will be faster than that then, obviously, because it's a smaller car, same tech?
No, I think so. And as far as we know, the Tesla Plaid Model S uses their older batteries, the 18650 batteries, which they've been using since the beginning. So it's quite remarkable that they were able to squeeze this kind of performance with their oldest battery technology. But going forward, of course, they're going to switch to the 4680 batteries, which they should be able to get even more power out of. That's what's probably going to go into the Roadster. The fact that we don't know too many details about the battery pack. At the presentation, Musk just said it's an all-new battery pack, but we assume it's the older batteries, and yet they were still able to get this performance out of them. So the Roadster going with the new batteries, these new motors, it's going to be ridiculous.
187 miles or 300 kilometers of range in 15 minutes. Impressive. We don't know the battery size. We don't know the charging rate. The V3 supercharger, as you said, is limited to 250 kilowatts, but he hinted, and this is pertinent to what we were talking about, he was hinting that maybe we get it up to 280 or 300 kilowatts and eventually 350 without specifying a timeline, and that tells me that those V3 superchargers are ready to go to 350. If the competition is, I don't see why Tesla wouldn't be too. It has PlayStation 5 level gaming. You get a free PlayStation essentially with it, a gaming console that is up to current standards, a sound system that updates over the air, and has, 28 speakers or something. It's ridiculous. Or maybe it's 52 or something. It's a lot of speakers.
Yeah, as well as active noise cancellation, which other cars do have, where it records the outside sound and then cancels it out with the sound system. So it's apparently super quiet inside. And
they have delivered a couple dozen of these so far, and they are getting tested on the track. This morning, one hit the track at 1.98, but they made the track sticky when they did that, so that sort of changes it and makes it a little faster, I guess, off the rolling start.
Yeah, so that's the Motor Trend article just came out this morning. So Motor Trend was able to get a final production version of the car, and that big article is out there now. And yeah, they went to the drag strip. They got 0 to 60 in 1.98 seconds. So Motor Trend was hugely impressed with the car. They did have a few nitpicks, but I'm actually going to read a quote from the Motor Trend article because I thought this was some nice automotive journalism writing here. So here's the quote. "The Plaid covers distance so quickly, it's difficult to even register what's happening. The yoke gets light in your hands, your neck muscles strain as your helmeted head digs into the headrest, and your surroundings blur into mere shapes and colors as a quarter mile of pavement vanishes underneath you."
Kind of like the special effects in the Spaceballs movie or the Star Wars like hyperspeed type of thing.
That is
that things
exactly
blur.
it, yeah.
That is crazy. And most people aren't in electric cars for the speed, but they are a nice little touch when you're merging into traffic on the freeway to just tap that pedal and transport yourself in time. Anyway, so Brian, that's it. We'll be back after the break. The Plaid starts at $130,000, and Brian will be updating us on what happened with his Tesla service visit. Stay tuned.
The Clean Energy Show wants to hear from you. Contact us on Twitter, Clean Energy Pod, by email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, by voicemail, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And Brian, you're back from your Tesla service call, which only took a couple of minutes. Do you want to share what happened?
Yeah, so he was basically finished by the time I got out there. So, yeah, there was just a couple of service bulletins that had to do with, like, the control arms in the front needed some kind of lubrication. And then there was a couple of connectors near the back wheels that need to be checked. So these are issues that they've discovered, but he said, everything was fine. No real problem. But yeah, it was nice to go up and meet him and say hello. He was driving a Tesla Model S that's had Tesla service written on the side. So
Did you take
it's
a
nice
picture?
to kind of just find out how that whole thing works.
Take a picture?
I did not take a picture.
I want to see what this Tesla service vehicle looks like. I want to tweet it. Come on. Somebody's got a picture. Somebody else has a
Too
picture.
late. I'm sure he's long gone.
Okay. Well, if you're listening, and you're not because it's a podcast, we're not live, come back to Brian's house. So basically, you didn't have to be there. All you had to do is give him approval to open the vehicle. Like, how does that work? On your app or something?
Yeah, it's booked through the app, and then he was just sending notifications. Like the first one was a text that said, "I'm on my way." The next one was a text that said, "I'm beginning to work on the car. You don't need to be here, but that's what's happening." And then the third text was, "I'm finished," and that's about the time I managed to get up there.
That's impressive. You didn't have to do anything, and it was quick. And I don't know how they lubricate things under the car that quickly, but did you have Sentry mode on? Can we watch the guy do it? I mean,
good point. I think Sentry mode was on, so yeah, maybe I could pull a clip from that. I'm not sure.
Pull a clip from that, and we'll tweet it out if there is one. Check our Twitter account, Clean Energy Pod. So, what else did you want to talk about this week, Brian?
Yes. So there was a story from Clean Technica about new power capacity in the USA in the first quarter of the year. So this is January to March. And I just thought I would mention it because it came out as 99.7% of new electricity capacity in the first quarter of the year was solar and wind power. This won't continue forever, and I'm sure next quarter, some idiot will put up a coal plant or something, but an entire quarter, 99.7% of new electricity capacity was solar and wind in the U.S.
I don't think there is any new coal plants going up in the U.S. If we're wrong, we'll rectify that.
Possibly natural gas is more likely, but
natural gas is far more likely, and I'm be very surprised if any coal. I mean, they're all closing down the coal plants. It's rapidly accelerating as the cost of, as they say, building new solar plants is cheaper than just running your coal plant. Not building a new one, just running the damn thing. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's been, in spite of the pandemic, it's been a pretty good year for green energy and clean energy, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, there's some other things I wanted to talk about. Benchmark Minerals has thrown some cold water on EV adoption. These are the people who monitor the mineral supply needed for electrification of the grid and electric vehicles. And they were kind of critical about Bloomberg New Energy Finance having statements about battery raw materials meeting demand. They said that there is misleading as Elon Musk statements about batteries. Long term, 20 years, they see no issue. Short term, like 10 years, major issues they see. Raw materials availability will slow EV adoption. They say it takes 5 to 7 years to build a lithium mine, which seems like a long time to me. 24 months to build a battery plant. And by the way, GM has added 2 battery cell plants, this morning. One day, before I had breakfast, there was 2 new announcements. It's ridiculous how this is taking off. And if you are a mineral supplier and you're not building a supply chain for minerals, you're leaving money on the table, a fortune. Many of these lithium mines are 3 years in already, they say, but that's 3 years to new supply, they're saying. So, yeah, we are seeing constraints in the battery field, Brian.
Yeah, and the chart that I saw said that, like, the mineral shortage, it might be like 2024, 2025. That's when it's sort of going to be at its worst, because vehicle production will be quite ramped up at that point. But, the supply of stuff for the batteries may not be ramped up fully yet.
I think 2030, which is kind of what our show is based on, of, most of the changes happening by then. We're just covering how it's happening. I think robotaxis will be a thing, and that's what they anticipate. People will adopt owning cars. Car ownership will fall off even more. It's already fallen off. And a lot of experts are saying that combustion engine, sales have peaked years ago. Like, not tomorrow, not today, years ago. Yeah. And it certainly seems that way. I know they're lasting longer, combustion vehicles, than they used to, and they're not rusting as fast, so people don't necessarily unload them. But it's and also, people are saying my next car is going to be electric. Even people who don't know anything about it. Even people who are just listening to our show for the first time. Hello, you're here. You're in the right place. You're among friends.
Yeah, certainly the people I know are thinking about electric for their next car. But of course, we live in a bit of a, green EV bubble, as it were.
True enough. But surveys are showing that even in Alberta, a lot of people, I think more than half, are, we mentioned this in the previous show. I don't have the numbers I had in front of me, but it was a significant number, electric vehicle, next vehicle.
No, and I wanted to mention another survey that was just in the newspaper today that said only 20% of Canadians are looking forward to working in the office again, which means 80% of the people who were able to work at home for the last year do not want to go back to the office. And of course, this is going to affect demand.
Yes.
If they can convince their bosses to keep working at home, less driving needed, less gas needed, etc.
There was a major financial company in the States, I can't remember which one, that said, you're coming back in September or else you don't have a job. So I've heard figures of people predicting 50% will go back, but it sounds like almost all of them don't want to. I don't want to. I'm working from home. I don't want to go to Brian's studio every Wednesday morning and go through that hellish commute and that god-awful radon you have in your basement.
Well, I am scheduled to begin teaching my university classes in person in September.
Oh, that's good.
And I'm quite looking forward to that because I just much prefer it to Zoom. Absolutely. I prefer being in the same room with my students.
I think if anything we've learned, teaching does not work remotely. I remember do you remember back in the mid-'80s when I was in university and you were a couple of years ahead of me, they had this remote learning office in the education building?
Oh, yeah. Our university was kind of ahead of the curve in this, where they would offer university classes to these kind of satellite cities elsewhere in the province, and they would cover it with these, video cameras.
But I don't think they got a very good education. But it's interesting that they were doing it back then. And we are a sparsely populated place, so it was a matter of bringing access to people who couldn't maybe normally get it. So I just remember that from decades and decades ago. And I think a lot of people assumed that remote learning would work better, that would be part of our future even.
Well, and this is what I will say. I think if you are really interested in learning, you can absolutely get over that hurdle of remote learning because, especially university education, it is really up to you as the student to get the education you want. So if you're the kind of person that's really self-motivated and wants to learn, you can do it in any myriad of strange ways.
Yeah, if you have any thoughts on if you want to go back to work or anything else, get a hold of us. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com or on Twitter, Clean Energy Pod, as we've said before. These are just some of the things we're interested in. It could affect the price of oil. It could affect EV adoption. It could affect, a few $1 billion went back into Waymo today, I think. They've got a pricing round to hire a bunch of people so that they can start. I think that's taking off. I think that's moving forward, and they're going to start actually rolling that out. Driverless taxis. Yeah,
Waymo, one of the people trying to solve that problem.
And maybe they will be first. What's your latest view on Tesla Autopilot full self-driving? I mean, what's taking so long? Where is it?
We're still 1 to 2 weeks away, which we have been for the last year or so. But I feel like I should probably have that software in my car by the end of the summer, at least.
Right.
That's my hope.
Right. I'm going to bet against that. I'll say this time next year. I do want Tesla to work out, and I'm kind of betting that they will, but I'm just, delay after delay, Brian.
And there's 2 stages to it. One where we actually get the software and start driving around with it, and then the second stage where it's actually approved by regulators, which that's definitely a couple of years down the road.
Right. Well, Tesla is in talks to open its Supercharger network to other automakers in Germany. This is something that Elon has said for a long time that he would be willing to do, but there has been no takers. Well, now it seems like something might happen in Germany. Last year, Elon Musk even said that Tesla superchargers are now being used low-key by other automakers. Do you know what that means, or do you have any thoughts on what that could possibly mean?
No, I'm not sure anyone really kind of figured out what he meant. I think people thought maybe it was Rivian, like they're a small startup, so maybe kind of Rivian's test cars are using it. That was my best guess.
Oh, okay. Well, don't they have a lawsuit against Rivian? That kind of saddens me that they do, but...
Oh, yeah, that's true. They are fighting, so maybe it wasn't Rivian.
Tesla has often indicated that they are open to the idea of sharing the Supercharger network with other automakers, but it would be dependent on coming to an agreement on sharing the cost. And, because you got to pay your way. You got to pay for the electricity and the overhead, and maybe a hint of a profit there as well. German Transport Minister Andreas Schur said, I am in direct contact with manufacturers such as Tesla in order to ensure that existing infrastructure, for example, Tesla superchargers, is also open up to other manufacturers. So I don't know if this is a way of mandating it with their cooperation or what, Brian.
No, and they've done a smart thing in Europe, standardizing on the CCS connector. Right. So Tesla cars here in North America use the proprietary connector, and they started using that when they started in Europe. But at a certain point, European Union settled on CCS as the standard that everybody has to use. So they have that advantage. Anyone with an older Tesla car has an adapter that will work with the new CCS stations. So that bodes well for, universal use in Europe.
Okay. I just wanted to read you this quote because I got interested in something here. There are a few technical issues to be cleared up, and this is what the German Transport Minister, but I expect we will come to a resolution. The aim is the barrier-free use of the charging stations of all providers for all e-cars, now with a uniform payment system, ideally a smartphone, and then you can relax and get real or vegan currywurst while charging your car. So you can just relax and get real or vegan currywurst. And Brian, I asked myself, what is currywurst? So I looked it up. Do you know what currywurst is?
No, tell me.
It's a fast food dish of German origin consisting of steamed and fried pork sausage. You got steamed pork sausage and you got fried pork sausage in one, which would be 2 different kinds of pork sausages, if you ask me, which is like German bratwurst.
It's a win-win.
Typically cut into bite-sized chunks and seasoned with curry ketchup. Didn't know there was curry ketchup. A sauce based on spiced ketchup or tomato paste topped with curry powder, or a ready-made ketchup seasoned with curry and other spices. The dish is often and almost always served with French fries. Any interest in currywurst? Would you try it?
Sure, I'd try it.
You try anything, though. All right, Brian. Anonymous attacked Elon Musk, Tesla. We talked about it last week. They had came out with a video on YouTube, a secondary channel, and you have some more information on this.
Well, yes, and the main anonymous Twitter account later on put out a tweet that said, okay, that wasn't really us, that wasn't really anonymous. But I have more late-breaking news to add to this story. James, we were contacted by Anonymous, and they said, you are the Clean Energy Show. You have reach around the world. Why don't you share this next message from Anonymous? They wanted us to share this with the world. This is a response to what was essentially a kind of a false video that was not the real Anonymous from last week that we talked about. So worldwide exclusive. Here we have a message from Anonymous.
Greetings, citizens of the world. This is a message from Anonymous. We present an apology to Elon Musk. The Anonymous hit piece on Elon Musk was fake. It was fake Anonymous. I mean, it was still an anonymous video, but it wasn't anonymous. We are legion, but some of us are also dumbasses. So just to be clear, electric cars are cool. Space travel is cool. Fossil fuels are killing the planet, yada yada yada. Maybe just knock off the crappy Doge memes, Elon. We're here for something far more important than advancing the transition to clean energy and transportation. We're coming for you, Tim Cook. We're coming for you, Apple. I've purchased many Apple mobile devices. All of them came with earbuds, and they don't stay in my ears. They never have. So I bought some expensive wireless AirPods because I heard they go in your ears in a different way. And they do, but they still fall out, especially when I'm chewing. And then the dog ate one of them, and I had to follow him around until he pooped it out. And I've had to clean it and put it back in my ear because they're very expensive. We're putting you on notice, Apple. We are anonymous. We are legion. And we have very big ear holes.
We don't usually get exclusives here on the Clean Energy Show, Brian, but this is this is newsmaking.
No, and that was oddly specific. That's very, very specific.
Weird. Is there a video of this that we can put on our channel? Is there anything else that they sent us?
Yes, this is a video, so you can go to the Clean Energy Show on YouTube if you want to look at the anonymous video.
Okay. Well, so change of heart. Turns out that the first anonymous video wasn't from a legit anonymous channel. It was from an anonymous person pretending to be anonymous. How does that work?
Well, I don't know, but this is almost certainly the real Anonymous, but they've just chosen us to deliver their message.
Okay. Well, we thank you, Anonymous. I'm sorry about the bad things I said about you last week. We have a little bit of feedback I wanted to mention. Michael has wanted me again to look into the SAS Power feedback event, but they are talking about 15 years to pay for, they're saying, what's a good time? Is it 15 years? Is it 18 years? Those are not good times, Brian. What's a good payback period for solar that would make it appealing to people on their rooftop?
So this is for people who want to put solar on their roof.
Yes, they're asking.
And the rate that our utility is going to give them.
Yeah. And it's not good. First of all, it's terrible. It's going to take too long to pay for itself. You don't know if your solar system's going to even be working in 15 years. I mean, it may not. Your inverter might go or something like that. Nobody is going to want to pay back. No, regular people are not going to want to pay back that long. And as I've said before, and I told Michael this, that I am not any longer for governments putting money into rooftop solar. The reason is the point of view is that the climate is in a crisis, and we need to put our money into solar farms on massive scale. And of course, rooftop solar is much more expensive per kilowatt or per unit of electricity than, much, much more expensive. So, yeah, build huge, build now.
And I agree. I don't think utilities should necessarily be subsidizing people to put solar on their roof, but they should pay a fair rate for the power that goes back into the grid. And then it's another way of expanding the grid if you just, give people a half-decent rate for the extra power.
And I also got a note here, I believe from Joe, who said, hey, if you guys want to chat about actual range, viz. Stated range for EVs. We just got an EV. We feel like it's a bit lower than expected. Joe, you didn't do your research. That's all I have to say. Brian, what's the website where you can see real-world range of EVs?
evdatabase.org, and they do a city, a highway, a summer, a winter.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Really good resource and absolutely necessary before you buy an EV, just so you're not surprised and disappointed. We don't want that. And that's got to stop, Brian, if we're going to have massive adoption of EVs take off.
It's kind of like my pet peeve when they put out, LED light bulbs with kind of bad color to them, or, compact fluorescents that have bad color to them. And, the early adopters often bought, those compact fluorescent bulbs that used way less power, but, a lot of them had really ugly light. And so people formed a bad opinion about efficient lighting. And, that stuff shouldn't have even been allowed to market.
Also, Joe says we have ways to preserve energy and extended road trips that he wanted to share with us. The problem, Joe, is that we don't do interviews. This is not, you may have noticed if you've ever listened, we get this a few times. People say, I want to be on the show and talk about something local, or, it's our audience is very, well, it's a podcast. It's hard to have a local audience. And there are local podcasts, but this is not a local podcast. It just can't be by the nature of the broad topic we're talking about. So we don't have guests on. And if you want to write us a note about your experience, we'll read it, and that'll be cool. Or if you want to talk about it live, you can actually go to speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow and give us a statement, and you can be on the show that way. I think that's limited to a minute, but you could do a couple, I suppose. He says they're probably very obvious stuff. His wife refuses to turn off the seat warmers. Ha. The seat warmers don't use electricity, Brian. You know how I know?
How?
Well, it doesn't reduce my range when I turn them on, for one. Here's another thing. I had a seat warmer in my last car that I bought at a store that you just buy by itself, and you plug it into the 12-volt lighter socket, the auxiliary power socket, right?
So you're saying the seat heaters in an electric car take it from the 12-volt system, not from the
I'm saying
overall
because
battery.
they take it from the 12-volt system, that's not a lot of power. Your 12-volt system is not going to move your car an inch. Literally, is not going to move an inch for your 12-volt battery. So the amount that they take is so small that you could plug in two of them into your 12-volt, and it's not much power. That's a common mistake. I'm sure, if you drove for 24 hours straight, it would take up probably 4 blocks of range. It wouldn't be that much because they cycle on and off, and they're not even on constantly. And the power that you do use is so small that the wires are, like a speaker wire or something like that. I don't know. It came to my mind when I saw your tweet because I was asking about people what they thought. But congratulations, Joe, on getting an EV. You, like everyone else, will find that it's the best car you've ever had. And we look forward to hearing about your experiences. I assume you're a local person, and if you want to let us know how things work next winter, get back to us. Expect to lose range. Some people here in our sparsely populated province who have long commutes buy them for long commutes and then are disappointed. Don't do that. Know what your range is. But yeah, contact us. Twitter, email, TikTok, voice message, everywhere. everywhere you want. Even Facebook, I hate to say it because I'm not a Facebook fan, but our videos are on Facebook on a page there. Our podcasts get uploaded as videos there, Brian.
Yeah, so natural gas in the home, this is kind of a pet topic of mine because I feel like we're ahead of the curve on this. We live in a frigid, cold place. We need lots of natural gas to heat our homes, and a lot of people also use it for cooking. And people are just now starting to wrap their brains around the fact that we're going to have to get rid of natural gas in the homes. So I pulled a clip from a show called Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, our fellow Canadian Samantha Bee. And I always like it when comedy shows are doing a little bit of actual journalism. So there was new information in their story about natural gas that I hadn't heard before. So I pulled a clip.
Wait, this was supposed to be a fun little piece about summer recipes and cooking. I love my gas stove. It's efficient, it makes me a professional chef, and all these influencers say it makes the food, oh, I don't know, tastier, brownier, flamier.
Natural gas.
Natural gas.
Natural gas. Look at that flame.
You'll have to pry my gas stove from my cold, dead hams. I make delicious pan-fried ham.
The gas industry's done a great job marketing. I have to give it to them. But gas stoves emit a lot of the same pollutants that come from our car tailpipes in your home.
That can't be good for you.
And remember those influencers who love gas as much as the color burnt orange? They were actually paid by the gas industry. Not so cute now, huh?
Gaslight.
Those big groups of gas-loving citizens, you guessed it, they're actually actors paid by big gas.
Yeah, so the gas industry is paying Instagram influencers to talk about their gas cooking appliances. And, they probably don't know, to be honest, that, the noxious fumes that come out of natural gas. But this is a tactic we're probably going to see more of. They referenced in the same piece on Full Frontal that there was a New Orleans City Council meeting where the gas industry paid actors to show up at the meeting and pretend that they were concerned citizens who
Are
love
you
gas.
kidding me? I'm getting pissed off here. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But there's a quote here from the story. It was very shady, very secretive, especially when we got paid. They literally paid us under the table, said one of the actors who spoke at the meeting. So they weren't even paying them legitimately. It was it was all under the table. At least they could have hired real actors and paid union scale or something like that. But yeah, it's just one of those disturbing things. And I think I have kind of fallen for that propaganda in the past. Like you just hear, and I've talked about this before, we put in a gas cooktop a few years ago and you sort of hear, oh yeah, chefs like that the best. If you're serious about cooking, natural gas is the way to go. But the thing that surprised me the most about our natural gas cooktop is how long it takes to boil water. It's insane how long it takes. And you end up with just a huge amount of heat just leaking into the room because it's just this flame underneath the pot. So, most of the heat gets wasted into the room and it takes way, way longer to boil water on a gas stove. I was really surprised.
And you've since switched to induction at the cottage, and you're thinking about doing it at home in the future as well, right?
Eventually, we will do induction at home. That's what everyone recommends. It's faster than a normal electric stove if you want to boil water on it. Now, we have a fancy 240-volt kettle that I bought from the UK. We put in a special 240-volt plug because we boil a lot of water. We drink a lot of tea and coffee. So that's a good way to do it. But induction is way faster than a normal kettle or a normal stove in things like boiling water.
Coming up shortly is the lightning round, where we'll clean up the week's headlines one after the other in brief. And Brian, it's time for the EV of the week. Listen, I wanted to just go over to Lucid Air because it is the most impressive car that is not on the road yet. That is because they're opening a store in Vancouver. So I thought, hey, that's legit. Anytime somebody opens a storefront, these are actually coming, and even where we live. So 517 miles of range, that is 832 kilometers on a single charge if the EPA test cycle pans out. So that's 406 miles for the Lucid Air Pure, 503 miles for the Lucid Air Dream, and $517 the maximum, the higher end for the Lucid Air Grand Touring. Production is set, I understand, for right now. Have you heard any updates on that, Brian? Is it delayed? Because it's supposed to be coming out right about now.
Well, pretty much everything is delayed when it comes to, it's not just Tesla that's delayed. So, yeah, sure, these things take time, always take longer than people expect. But, it should be out soon-ish.
So that range doesn't come free. It is a 113 kilowatt-hour battery, which I believe will be the largest battery in a vehicle. Will it not? I mean, what's the highest on a Tesla? 100?
Yeah, it's around 104, 100,
something like that. So this will probably be the highest. It's got a 900-volt plus electrical architecture, which allows for fast charging, right? Is there any other advantages to that high-voltage architecture that you know of?
No, I think it's just, the more volts, the better. Everything's faster. Everything's faster.
So you got an onboard AC charging to 19.2 kilowatt hours at home. I do 3.3. Most people, that's because I had a base model of an early model of an EV, but most would do 6.6 or higher. 7.8 is common now, but 19.2 you would have to spend a lot of money to upgrade the electrical in your home. Probably not worth it because you're charging overnight anyway. You do have this massive battery and you're not going to run out. So I don't know.
But it's an expensive luxury car, so presumably the people that can afford it might be able to afford the electrical work to get that higher rate.
But this brings me to my next point. If you're building a new home, what would you do? If you're building a new home right now, building a new cottage or something, which seems remotely possible, that's something you would do. What would you do for the electrical? Would you have something special in place? I mean, should people be doing that?
Well, everybody should overbuild. If you're building something new, put in, like 3 times as much power capacity as a normal house or what you think you're going to need, because in the future, you're going to need to charge your cars and you're going to need to heat your home. If you're not doing it already, heat your home with electricity. These things are going to take a lot more power than most homes around here are equipped for.
I had to put in a electrical sub-panel, which is like a baby electrical box. So that cost a little bit of money. It didn't take a lot of time to do that. And he switched things around a little bit to spread out the box. So now I have more, I can add more things, which is nice. I had it done when I had my solar panels done. I had a 40 amp cable put to the front of the house exterior. I don't have a garage. I just want to keep mentioning that because a lot of people ask, can you charge a car in the driveway? Absolutely, yes. We both do. You have a carport, but it is essentially outside, and I'm completely outside. There's no problem. The car charging equipment is made to go outdoors, so yeah, absolutely. And so the charging system for the DC fast charging for the Lucid Air is 350 kilowatts peak, which is not 350, but it's getting there, Brian.
Yeah, it's impressive. Let's just see them get it out.
All right, let's go to the lightning round.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round.
Sentry mode's not working on Tesla Vision cars. These are the new cars that don't have radar on them. Known bug, known timeline to fix. Are you concerned about this at all? That the new cars are getting out too fast and are not working properly?
No, it's a typical, tech software problem. Same thing happens with phones sometimes. They'll change the hardware on the phone and features that you used to have, suddenly you don't have them, but, they can bring them back again. I often wonder how many people are working in software at Tesla because it must be enormous because, they're kind of a software company first in many ways. And so, yeah, all this stuff will come back. But, software is slow.
Toyota says it's still too soon, as we've mentioned, to focus on electric cars, and will go bankrupt soon, says James Whittingham of the Clean Energy Show. Even Honda, the other laggard here, is saying we'll be all electric 2040. 2040 is not soon enough. We have jurisdictions as soon as 2025. We have European clean energy transportation, California, a lot of jurisdictions, and it's ever expanding. And England is what, 2030 now or 2035? I can't remember. I'm getting confused.
I forget, but
it keeps going down. I think it's 2035 or 2030. And you're not going to sell cars. You can't make cars for half the markets of the world and still be profitable. Goodbye, Toyota. I'm sorry to the guy who listens to our show from the Toyota factory. I'm sure you'll do well. It'll be the only Toyota they sell. You have the best job security at Toyota right now. And if anyone's wondering, I will become CEO of Toyota if they ask me. I think I would do a good job. I'd have to leave the show for conflict of interest.
Well,
but
you better not do it then.
what's more important? They'd have to make me a good offer to tear me away from this show. Honda Clarity plug-in hybrid is gone, to my surprise, after 2021.
I didn't know that.
This is I think 70 kilometers of range. Fairly good range for a plug-in hybrid where you can, it's a big car. It's ugly. It's got a drape over the rear window, which is something from past times.
And I'm not a big fan of the design direction of Honda lately.
Yeah, it's Toyota's had some criticism too. Their Prii have looked very weird. There has been a study that shows how U.S. utilities are trying to block rooftop solar adoption. And Brian, I'm having a hard time having any sympathy for the oil industry after what you told me earlier. It's there's evil and then there's just batshit evil. Like, this is not good stuff here. I'm not happy. I'm just screw them. Harley-Davidson's new electric motorcycle has a name. They are creating a new brand called the Livewire. Instead of being a Harley-Davidson branded motorcycle, they're creating a new sub-brand, which disappoints me. Do you have any feelings on that?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering what they were going to do about that because, of course, Harley-Davidson is a real legacy brand that is very tied to internal combustion cars. Like, they actually have a patent or a trademark on the sound of a Harley-Davidson. The sound of that engine is unique.
Wow.
And they trademarked it. So they're very tied to the old world. So, yeah, how are they going to navigate that? They have to go electric. Pretty much everybody does, or they'll go out of business. But, it's kind of goes against their brand. And you and I, quite a while ago now, talked about The Long Way Up, that excellent TV show that's on Apple TV, highly recommended, where they used some Harley-Davidson Livewire prototype motorcycles, which seemed really great. But, yeah, it's something they have to navigate, like all of these legacy, not just image, but, shutting down one production line, starting up another one is a way more difficult and complicated thing than, creating a separate division, maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
GM to engineer and supply Ultium batteries for Wabtec locomotives. So GM is engineering and supplying their new Ultium batteries. By the way, the World Cup, not the World Cup, the Euros, the soccer tournament. My son's watching it as we speak and yelling in the background. The Greenpeace dropped a guy in on a paraglider, which has a big fan behind a parachute. And he hit a cable and almost killed everyone, including himself, yesterday. The video was quite dramatic just before the game. And one thing that I noticed is that the Euros are heavily sponsored by Volkswagen ID line of electric cars. And you constantly see those advertisements during the game and in the sideline video displays. And they said, not soon enough. We want it faster, Volkswagen. And so they almost killed them. They've actually, Greenpeace has apologized up and down, left and right, for what happened. And yeah, we have a clip of that now. Ah! I just made that up. We don't have a clip. Something like that. For the love of God. Okay, something like that. The guy's injured, actually, but he's okay. He's not, fatally injured or horribly injured. But
right.
So Tesla's battery tech shines as the new Model S long range gets a stellar EPA rating. So the battery tech in Tesla, they don't always tell you how it's getting better, but do you think it's getting better?
Yeah, it's probably a tweak in the chemistry. It's probably a tweak in the software. It sounds like slightly different battery pack architecture, perhaps. But yeah, of course, the Plaid is the one that we've been talking about, but there's also a Model S long range, which is also being refreshed. And if you want the range, that's the one to go for.
Bloomberg Green says the steel industry generates more CO2 than cars, buses, and motorbikes combined. So that is a major industry to decarbonize, and that will be one of the things that alternative fuels like fuel cells and things like that, and hydrogen. Do you think that hydrogen is the way to go, or is it like solar? Can solar power us? I don't know.
I don't know, but there was a story from Volvo recently that I just looked and found here. Volvo to build steel cars without fossil fuels by 2026. So Volvo has figured out a way to work on the steel, apparently carbon-free.
So this is, of course, Brian, is the same industry. The steel industry makes wind turbines and solar panels. So as we ramp that up and put a lot more of that into the world, we're going to need to decarbonize.
And countries like Canada that have a lot of jurisdictions where the electricity comes from hydropower mostly, there's a lot of clean electricity in Canada. So jurisdictions that have clean power are going to benefit just because people are going to want low carbon products.
There's a steel mill about 2 miles away from me. And they have a partner steel mill it's German owned, but they have one in Colorado. We talked about this before. They're going to decarbonize a lot of that, not all of it. And they're using solar for that. I don't know how that works. I don't have a good understanding of how that works. But I wish they would decarbonize, because if I get a wind in just the right direction, I get a steel mill smell, which is not as bad as the refinery smell I get from the other direction. I am triangulated between a oil refinery. I live against a pipeline of like 8 pipelines, all together. Some have kerosene and weird things like that in them, and propane, and then there's an Enbridge main pipeline as well.
I just watched this old Australian comedy film from the 90s called The Castle, and it's about this guy who, he lives. He always buys houses near things that everybody hates. So he's like got his house right near an airport under these giant power lines and stuff. And maybe you should watch that film and get some tips, because he's very optimistic about it all. He's like, oh, can you believe the great deal I got on this house? This is amazing.
Now, this has been another edition of Brian's Movie Corner. Brian's Movie Corner. Tune in next week for another possible edition. We do like to talk about film occasionally. And we had a disagreement yesterday because I was very happy with Colbert coming back with a live studio audience, and you were saying, well, I liked the pandemic. That's like saying, those people locked in a room doing their comedy shows was the most depressing part of the pandemic, and you're saying, no, I really like the way that happened. Screw you,
No,
Brian
I kind of like
Stockton.
it just because it's something different. I mean, we've been watching these shows, over the last 30 years, so I just like getting something different, and I think that, the comedy changes slightly when they have to play to the crew, and I think that's kind of fun, particularly James Corden, like a guy I never particularly liked. But he seems funnier when he's playing to the crew. It's a bit more, inside baseball.
Maybe he cares less. I don't know. And this has been another edition of James's TV Corner.
James's TV Corner. Like Brian's TV Corner, but better.
All right, Brian, the first fully electric Lincoln is coming in 2022. Who cares? It's Ford's luxury brand. I'm sure it will be as faulty as other Lincolns, and the door locks and knobs won't work after a week, and your seats will fall apart. Luxury vehicles always need more service than non-luxury vehicles. It's like people who are rich and buy luxury vehicles, they just assume that's normal. Get an electric car, people. Get an electric car, and don't buy it from Ford, I think. I'm not sure, but I'm Brian, Keystone XL was killed. Since we last chatted, and I never really thought that it wouldn't be killed, but our Premier of Saskatchewan, Mr. Scott Moe, said, don't worry, I'm optimistic. He said that about a month and a half ago.
After it was canceled?
No, before it was canceled. He said, I'm talking to people on the golf course. It's going to be cool. It's not. Bosnia has canceled a $1 billion coal plant. And by the way, that's okay. A $1 billion coal plant is not one of your smaller ones.
That's huge.
It's a lot of coal. They canceled it, and they should have. people are saying, experts, analysts are saying that the Keystone, even if it was built, probably wouldn't be at full capacity in 8 years' time. And that is a stranded asset free. It's a term that I never used to know. We talk about it all the time on the show. Stranded assets in the oil industry and taxpayer money going to pay them off. So the G7 is to make a climate reporting mandatory among their countries, which some people are enthusiastic about. The Ford F-150 Lightning has an 85 mile per gallon gasoline vehicle footprint. So that's like a Prius. So with the same footprint as a Prius, but in a big...
Is that the same as like miles per gallon equivalent? Is that number?
It's the same footprint environmentally as a Prius, basically.
Gotcha.
Which is fantastic for
a giant truck,
a full-size pickup truck. However, that will keep getting better with the grid getting better. That's the way... It's allergy season. I realized peak allergy season for James.
So that's when you get the wind from the south.
I don't know. Getting the wind from somewhere. So what's the date today? It's mid-June. I would say 3 more shows of this, of James sneezing on the air. So then it'll get better. But it's going to get worse, Brian.
Well, it's good luck if you sneeze on a podcast.
We like to talk about meatless foods because they have smaller environmental impacts and will become part of an economic disruption to current food. I found it interesting that Finless Foods is set to introduce plant-based tuna by 2022. So they are working on fake fish, Brian. Fake fish. Any thoughts on that?
I've never been a big tuna fan,
No,
so
me neither.
I'm not sure I would try it, but it's all coming.
And finally, on this week's show, the city of Vancouver is considering a pollution charge of up to $1,000 annually for gas-powered sports cars, SUVs, and trucks. And this is the opposite of what we're doing where we live, where they're taxing EVs. And getting angry. Our oil-happy government is taxing EVs, and there's only 400 of them in our province of 1.2 million people. Getting angry, Brian. I'm getting angry.
Yeah, and this is for new cars going forward. So if you already own one, you're not going to have to pay this tax. But it's going to be on the purchase of new, polluting vehicles.
Well, that is our show for this week. We want to thank you for listening. We appreciate everyone. Be sure to get a hold of us. We like to hear from you. This has been our weekly conversation about how the world is changing due to improvements and advancements and updates and news and clean energy and transportation. Always a pleasure, Brian. We'll talk again next week.
See you next week.